Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Reclamation Project, where we believe in no soul left behind. We're here to provide a platform for both believers and non-believers to ask those tough questions, even when they're controversial, seemingly blasphemous, or otherwise offensive. It is it's our mission to give answers that are rooted in science and evidence where at all possible, but most certainly objective ones that aren't based or depend on our feelings. At the end of the day, it is our hope that you'll achieve a better understanding of God, which we know improves your perception, hence also your impression of him. After all, understanding is a difference maker and a deal breaker. And well, if you're already a believer, welcome to the opportunity of perhaps relearning some things. So we just thank you for tuning in. We're happy that you've joined us. Today's topic is the church overly financial burdening its members. Does it demand an excessive amount of time? Moreover, does it inadvertently actually diminish their sense of hope? So I encountered a video a few weeks ago, and in it, I was listening to activist and controversial figure, Dr. Umar Johnson, assert that it does. To be specific, he pointed out megachurches. I thought today would be a good opportunity to have a discussion just in generally speaking, because some of this, while he only applied it to megachurches, we could aptly apply it to church in general, large and small, to some degree. So our panel's here today, and we're just going to delve into these allegations against the church and explore whether there is validity to some of the claims that he made and the addendum, a claim that I am making. So we've got the elder, we've got Terrence here, we've got the good pastor Trey here. Good to see you, my brother. Seems like it's been for forever. We haven't even
haven't seen since last year.
Man. How's everything on the East Coast?
Everything is great, baby. East Coast, meeting
the
West Coast.
Yes.
Let's go, baby.
The way we do in the middle. Come on. So today is a controversial topic, boy. It's controversial, not so much because Dr. Umar Johnson is handing down this indictment on the church, as much as it's a sore spot for many churches to be challenged on what they're doing, not just what they're doing with the money, whether it's too much. So I guess I want to ask a general question first. Generally speaking, does Dr. Umar Johnson have a valid point when it comes to asking for too much financial resources from its members? So maybe what you could do is answer from the perspective of not your church, but just in general, church in general. Does he have a valid point by saying that they ask for too many financial resources from their members?
Come on, Terrence. Go take the first shot, Terrence. Knock him out.
I was trying to acquiesce and allow the actual pastor to speak. I mean, I would say it's hard to paint with a broad brush. And what I mean by that is both a yes and a no for me, because I can't speak to the level of transparency that's offered at every given church. So I don't know, what each individual or collective members may know about the finances of their church, what they're doing and what they're not doing. And so having said that, I think to a degree it's definitely possible. And in some cases, it actually is happening. I mean, we live in this technological age where, a lot of these mega church pastors are iconic figures in the media today. And so, we see them with their private jets and their hundreds of, let me say that plural, hundreds of $1,000 cars that they drive, and palatial homes. And so you question that in terms of the average member by comparison, that you're asking to continue to quote unquote sow a seed. So yeah.
So you've been kind, brother. You know what I'm gonna do first is let's play some of the video just about the financial part. So I'm gonna let Dr. Umar Johnson set it up with this video that I saw, and then I'm gonna share my thoughts on that. All right. So where is our sound? Oh, I need to turn it on. Okay, here we go.
Don't care about black folks. Nigga church don't care about black folks. Our problem with black religion is threefold. You take three things from black people that we can't afford to waste and can't never give back. Number one is money. You take too much resources. Every black church should have three institutions. You should have a school for our kids, a bank to invest in our people, and you should have a community garden to feed our people good food. Every church should have those three. If you are bringing in at least $250,000 a year in tithes, and you ain't got a school, a bank, and a garden, I don't care who you are. Remember what I said, 250K. If you less than 250K, you should still be doing something. But I'm not going to hold you to the same standard. But if you
Okay, so I'm gonna stop right there. Did you hear that? That's a trade.
There's a little echo, but for the most part, I can see it plus the words on the screen.
Okay.
So I
All right.
I'm saying.
All right, I'm gonna work on that, on correcting that. So here, let me go ahead and answer. I'm not gonna be as kind as Elder Terrence here, and I'm just gonna say whether it's my church or any church, but I'll speak from just church in general. They do ask, because I mean, if I think about all the different types of churches, I mean, all the different churches that I've been to across many different denominations, I see something that is prevalent in all of them: multiple offerings. In a 2-hour service, offering I have seen taken up as much as 3 or 4 times. In my mind, and particularly for someone who is passionate about the non-believing community, or who really are trying to make sense of the church and God, and who would give it a second chance, give the church a second chance and give God a second chance. But if it weren't for some of these things that we do that just that seem to just defy logic, I can't. I have to ride with Dr. Umar Johnson on this. They asked for too much money. Like, why wasn't it enough in the first offering or the second offering? But you're coming back a third time and saying that you didn't collect enough. Like, where? I don't know of any examples where God did that, where Jesus did that. None. And like I said, I've seen this in many denominations. And so when I think about the perspective of a non-believer, I'm thinking, I'm like, they're looking at this and they're like, well, what kind of God do you serve? If he owns all the cattle on the hills, then why does he have to keep coming back twice, 3 times? Why does he have to come back? All right, and that's just one example. So I'll let you guys jump in right there, because that's been a sore spot for me, and in fact, it's one of the reasons why, for better or for worse, the Reclamation Project has not followed suit with that type of thinking. Do we provide an opportunity for people to donate or to give? Absolutely, but do you see us, saying, "Hey, I know somebody in here can spend $10,000. They can afford to give it." 5,000, 1,000, they work it all the way down to a single dollar. Now, granted, if you ask me, Stan, hey, what if they're doing that for TRP? Wouldn't you want that money? Okay, I'm human, so I mean, the collection, we're gonna utilize it. But if I have to choose between, hey, Stan, this is the way we're gonna do it, and I'm thinking on the other hand that this is what you've been preaching about for all these years, Stan. Are you sure you want to do that? I'm gonna have to decline. We can't do it that way. So let me let y'all jump in, man. All right. The church does ask for too much money.
Well, don't forget the Bible speaks specifically about giving, what that looks like. 10% of your income. It doesn't change no matter what church you're at. Now, the storehouse is supposed to be the church and the denominational conference in which you return your monies, and they have their own structure, how it's set up and where the funds go. But no one is supposed to pressure anybody to give more than what the Word of God describes each faithful believer to give. We give 10%, that's what the word derivative of the word tithe means. So of whatever you make, and so that's the tithe. The offering, at least I know in the denomination of SDA, the offering is the only part of it that stays at the local church, while 100% of the tithe goes to conferences and union and all the way up to the GC. So the offering is how you run the church. Now, after the 10%, we're supposed to give offering based off of how much we make and are able. So we have to make that judgment call of offering. Nobody says a specific percentage of offering you have to give. So that's between you and God. But we do encourage individuals that if God has blessed you with more, and then if you're able to give more offering, then that is a good thing. Again, if you are able, and the offering goes to the church. Now, all the additional projects in the church and fundraisers in the church, and you can let different clubs get up and little kids say we need to go to Gillette, Wyoming for Pathfinders, and they're asking, and everyone's asking. So the pastor has to be careful not to let that happen, to pull on everybody's heartstrings and make them feel like they have to come with their pocket every 5 minutes. The plate is not supposed to be going around that many times. And no, Jesus did not do that to people when they came to services. And you remember in the temple when they started to rob people and cheat people and fleece people. The Bible speaks specifically about not fleecing the sheep or hurting them to the point where they're giving too much beyond what they were able. But that was the reason Jesus went and purified the temple, pulled out a whip that started, said, "My house should be a house of prayer." And everybody ran out that was stealing. He said, "You made to a den of thieves." So if it could happen then, I know it can happen now. It's just a little more with technology, it's a little more modern thievery, but at the same time, it's still happening. So it's very unfortunate.
So I'm glad you said that, because what you have just highlighted is that there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. Now, the reason why, if I might dare try to speak for Dr. Umar Johnson in this case, the reason why he's speaking this about the church and money is because he's seen it done the wrong way. And too often, well, we're going to get to that. This is a later question about whether or not things of this nature are well received by the church. Indictments, condemnations. But nonetheless, he's raising this as an issue because he has evidently seen it done wrong. And so I appreciate you saying that, yes, that there is. So in the very beginning, you described how it should be or how it can be done right, how it can be done in a way that's in accordance with what the Bible teaches. But that's not the way everyone does it. And I am going to get to asking you specifically. I was actually going to get to that. Ask everyone specifically, how does your church, wherever that is, how do they do it? But generally speaking, does he have a point?
I think he definitely has a point. I was trying to wait to present this part, but just recently, there was this pastoral evangelical leadership conference that just happened, and a prominent pastor addressed this very thing about how we need to revisit some of the ways that we do church and some of the ways that we finance church. And one of the things that came up was the structure in which we have in place for tithes and free will offerings.
True.
Right. I can remember the 2008 economic fallout. And so when that happened, the denomination that I'm under, they were still looking for that tithe to come to the conference office and then for the local church to take care of itself, as you just iterated, with their free will offering. But then the question became, if we're struggling and we're in the midst of this economic fallout, and you're still asking us to send these monies forward so that you can go take care of whatever else around the world that you're trying to take care of, and we're left to basically clean our own kitchen ourselves while we've already sent the bulk of our monies elsewhere. It puts some frowns upon the faces of the people. And so I think with Dr. Umar, for instance, he's probably not so much talking about the denomination that we're all a part of. He's talking about these others where, on the most part, that money stays right there at home. They don't have the same structure that we have. And so it's a little more easy, and you're a little bit more flexible in terms of how you can deal with those monies. However, my main point is this: without a sure level of transparency in terms of where those monies are going and what they're doing, I imagine if I'm an unbeliever, I have a problem with that. I know you're a pastor, but like Stan and myself, who work outside of that, it's like if you're a part of a union and the union says that they're going to endorse this political party, you're like, man, those are my union dues endorsing someone who does not even value my life because of what I look like, the level of melanin that I have in my skin. So you have a problem with that. You can make an informed decision on whether or not you want to stay with that union. But in this situation, these folks under the umbrella of religion can take those monies and do something with it that you may not necessarily agree with. There's pretty much nothing you can really do. You can make a fuss about it, but they're still going to do what they're going to do. So as a non-believer, understand that I'm looking at it from that perspective. It's like, well, why would I join forces with something like that where there are not some perceived checks and balances in terms of how we can control, where these monies go to? Because again, and that economic fallout, it's like, man, basically me and my people over here starving. Some people, their houses went upside down. You're underwater, whatnot, what have you. You telling me to send you some money when I'm having trouble even taking care of my own?
That reminds me of, as soon as you started talking about that, I was reminded of the story of the children of Israel when they were in Egypt, and Pharaoh was seeking to take vengeance on them for asking for time to go. Well, when Moses went back and he was saying, "Yo, my God has said we need to go and worship Him, and we need to bounce," and so, as a consequence, he told him, "Well, you know what? That straw we were getting for the bricks that you need
was
to
the
bake,
new Pharaoh. Yes.
You guys get it yourself now. You guys get it yourself." So, and you still have the same quota. So they still needed to produce the same amount, even though they had to take time out to go and get the straw as well.
Exactly.
So, that reminds me of this scenario where you expected to produce the same amount when there is, the crash of the economy. But I have to gently separate myself and isolate. I'm just representing God today. I'm not representing the church. But, you did speak about how churches that you're familiar with has a different type of structure. So perhaps that's just an area in which, others can learn from. Is it foolproof? I mean, does it work? Does it, does it need some?
It does need some work, and that's why I keep repeating that word, transparency. Folks want breadcrumbs. Folks want breadcrumbs. They want to know, as they should, well, where is this money going? I believe that transparency really offers a sense of security. Folks can't just, do what they want to do with the money, because they know eyes are watching every penny, every dime, in terms of where it's going. And when you don't have that level of transparency, then the question is, well, where are the checks and balances? It's the reason why people keep coming back for that third and that fourth offering.
So as my follow-up question, then, do you say, and Pastor Trey, you jump on in here, that your church, so my first question was, generally speaking, does church in general abuse the financial resources of its members? My response was, yes, they do. And you know,
I would say mine does.
I can't say all because I haven't been to all churches, but I have had a nice cross section. I've been to a nice cross section of churches all across the country, and I see some things that are happening in all of them, and it's wrong. So that's why I therefore say that church in general has been abusing the money. But now let's talk about specifically your church. Is your church? Do you believe that it is guilty of it, or are you guys clear?
I would say so, and the reason why I would say so is for me, just from my personal experience and what I've seen, the benevolent fund is the one with the least amount in it. And the benevolent fund is the one that's supposed to help people when they're in need, whether it's they need some food, they need a bill paid, or this, that, and the other, whatever that, real life situations. You know what I mean? That one, from what I've seen, and I've sat on many awards, right? And I've seen people go without.
So this is a sad testimony, but go ahead, Pastor Trey, you jump in, because perhaps where you are, you guys can serve as the poster child and the example of how others to follow when it comes to managing the financial burden of its members.
I don't know if that's the case, but I wouldn't be a part of a church or join a church that did not have full transparency in terms of where the funds are going. Each church should have meetings. They have meetings where all their leaders meet, and then they have a general meeting where the entire body is, or the church membership is invited to the meeting, and people can ask questions, but it's laid out in front of them. This is how the funds are being utilized that are coming into church. Once again,
that's good.
Yeah. Now,
start.
If you can't ask questions and get real answers, if you're not able to come to a meeting and to find out the finances of the church and how things are being allocated and being done, then of course you're not going to understand, and you wouldn't want to support. And there will always be a dark cloud of questions, unanswered questions that will cause you to feel some kind of way. But just remember, the overall concept is fine. And this is, I guess, the part I have a problem with Dr. Umar's approach. The church doesn't take anything from people. It opens its doors and invites people to come in and to give and to be faithful. They're not holding their gun up to people's heads. But what they can do is try to manipulate people's minds and try to take advantage of the teachings of the Bible to get them to give more than what the Bible even is telling them that they're supposed to give. And so that's when it goes too far. Now, if you know your Bible, then you already know how much you should give. And then if you're a part of a church and they have 10 and 15 other projects and they always begging, that gets on your nerves, you need to talk to your pastor, talk to the church leaders, and eventually you might need to find a new church home, because God didn't ask us to have all these projects to keep begging people. You give you a guilt trip every time. You don't go back in your pocket every time that something's up front that they're talking about doing. No worship service should include all of that. That is a shame. That takes away from the worship, and that it takes away from the beauty of it all. But remember,
God, the whole God experience.
Yeah, but God told Moses, build me a sanctuary, and I may dwell among them. And then he told them how to get the funds by telling the children of Israel to give from all the jewelry that they had spoiled the Egyptians and took from when they left. And in fact, everybody giving a little was so much, it was too much. He just said, y'all can take some of that back. I would love to see any church out there.
I ain't never seen that one. No, I knew you were going there. You don't even mention that. We ain't never heard of no church telling members that we're going to give something back.
We cutting everybody a check back. Y'all go ahead and use this and go on vacation with you and your families because too much came in. But see, that's what goes to show you this. We're so far from how the original church was, and the mindset and the spirit of giving. Do you know only 30%, and usually it's less, but on the high end,
that's generous. That's a generous number.
Yeah, so between 20% and 30% return a faithful tithe and offering. So the church has to run off of what a fraction of what people are giving. So you know what these preachers are doing? They put a greater weight on the faithful who are right there in front of their face, who already given. Say, I know you already gave, but can you give again? Because the 70% of the rest of them not giving, but the 30%, can y'all give again? That's not fair.
But that lends itself to a point that I think we're gonna cover a little bit later on in this broadcast. But that story, I hate to call it a story, that truth about Moses, my favorite part to all of that is when you read that no one had need of anything. So that told me that Moses and all of those on that leadership board were walking within the parameters that God had set for them in terms of their assignment, that folks were honest and that they were forthright. And so to go back to my earlier statement, which I don't step away from, my point is this, that there's always room for improvement. Clearly, if you're saying, and I believe you, because I know you sit in that position, you're in that office, that if it's only somewhere between 20 to 30% of the people returning a faithful tithe, then clearly somebody's not being honest about what it is that they're professing and what it is that they're doing. You got to make up for it some kind of way, and you're right, it should not fall on the faithful few. And so that means that certain people or certain parts of the ministry, should I say, are going to go without.
So what I want to say something that sort of goes against what you said, but for the most part, it's in harmony, and that is that while with both of you, you said, while the numbers may say that the averages are 30% or so are doing most of the legwork, you've got to consider that out of that 70%, perhaps some of them just don't have any at all, because the Bible does talk about how if you don't have it, there's a community, there's a population that was exempt from giving because they were just too poor to give. And so you've got to understand that perhaps some of the 70 falls into that category. Right. Well, we don't really have a designated Levite type trial today, but I see where you're going with that. Right. They were exempt from it as well. But your point is taken. And what I want to highlight is the fact that, Pastor Trey, that you, as I thought would be the case, seem to serve as an example for how others to follow. You talked about transparency. You talked about how not overburden them. If this were the case, if this is the way it was done in every church in America, we probably wouldn't have Umar getting on there. I mean, not obviously, but I don't agree with everything that Umar posits in his life and what he believes. But when I saw this video, I was with him. I'm on the bandwagon because I see why. And he can't be the only one who sees that, who's feeling that. But you were a great example. You're a great example, Pastor Trey. In fact, if anybody's in the New Jersey area, if you need a church to go to, it's his church that you need to come to, and we can get the information on where to come later. But or Pastor Dre in Florida. So we can vet these guys individually. I don't do no across all boards type stuff, but individually we will endorse these cats. But having said that, now this kind of sets us up. Because you said something, Pastor Trey, that sort of segues us into this next section. You talked about how if you're in a church where all the teaching is one way, then perhaps you need to, consider going to another church. So let's see what Umar has to say, because this is a good segue to the next section, aspect that he was referring to.
If you're $250,000 that you can depend on annually, you should have some institutions for the people. So number one, they take too much money. Number two, Joe, they take too much of our time. You don't get your time back. You can make that money back. You can't make your time back. Bible study, Sunday service, Sunday morning service, Sunday night service. Why are you taking all this time and not giving us nothing? And the third thing that they take from us.
Okay, right there. So let me stop right there at the at the time. Okay, so I know what some are gonna say. I already know what some are gonna say. You know what? You can't spend too much time with God or in the church. Actually, if they say you can't spend too much time with God, I won't argue with them. But if they use instead of God, they say the church, then I can immediately stand up and say, well, yeah, there is some
Mhm.
limit. We don't have time to be in the church house all day. In fact, the church wasn't, and it was never intended for
Mhm.
us to spend all our time in there. When are you doing outreach if all you doing is out
Mhm.
inreach all the time?
Mhm.
But let's ask the question, generally speaking.
Go ahead, Pastor.
Does he have a valid point when it comes to too much time? Does the church take too much of the members' time that they cannot get back? As he posited, you can make the money back, but you cannot get the time back. Generally speaking, does he have a valid point?
Well, I don't know a church that has all those days and demanding all that time.
Mhm.
But I would say the value of fellowship, spending time together as a church family in different
Mhm.
projects. You've got to have you've got to spend time, especially if you get involved, and you have to have meetings.
Mhm.
Those meetings, unfortunately, they can go, you know, sometimes they can go longer than intended, but it's for the purpose of doing something major. And even outreach is taking time. It doesn't have to
Mhm.
necessarily be in the four walls of the church, but if you are a
Mhm.
part of different outreach efforts, then it takes a while to go out there and to get everything organized and together and to take it to those that are in need and so forth and so on. Normally, um, at least in the SDA denomination, the entire Saturday is holy from sunset Friday to sunset Saturday night. So using that entire day for worship and for outreach, for fellowship, and eating together and studying the Word of God, um, that's not considered too much time. In fact, back in the old days, the worship service even went much longer than they do now. Things seem to be a bit more streamlined, but it's also not intended for everybody to do everything. And so that's what I'm saying. Dr. Omar speaks from one point of view, but it's a little more like Disney World. You can't get on every ride. You can't go to everything they've got. You go to the rides you want to get on, participate in what you enjoy. And so when you get to church, it was never intended for you to be a part of every ministry, to sign up for everything that they're doing, every meeting. You really have to be there, really? Okay,
Mhm.
no, that's extreme. What are the areas of your gifts? So you go to the one or two meetings that you're very much interested in, that scratch where you're itching, that help you to help the community. But if you're not willing to spend any time um, together, then the adverse effect is even worse. Um, that you'll be disconnected from the body or what they're doing. So I don't look at that as being accurate what he's saying, but I can see how some people can get too involved in all the meetings and neglect their family and neglect their own health, but that's not what
Mhm.
was ever intended when people are asking you to get involved.
So
Mhm.
before you go, so you just gave a good response as to how ideally a church should operate, and you're obviously positing that that's not your specific church. But generally speaking, I'm gonna ask you, Terrence, once again, does he have a point? Generally speaking, and then I'll go next and answer.
I think he does have a point, generally speaking. Once again, I would say that I don't know, excuse me, if he was in Dr. Umar's opinion, if he was really trying to articulate that he was speaking to meetings so much as he may have been speaking to for us Sabbath service, for others Sunday service, and just within the parameters of that work. Um, and I also agree with our brother here, the dear pastor, that you know fellowship definitely fosters a greater element of relationship with one another as members. It's good for me to just know more about you than just the brother that sits over there on that pew, right? That I actually have a name, that I actually have a relationship that I've built with you, that we can, if I need to, call upon you and pray with me and whatnot, what have you. Um, and Pastor talked about streamlining today versus how things were back in the day.
Mhm.
I would resort to a conversation I had with my daughter, my oldest child, about how they view church today. And, you know, one of the things that she said about her generation, she's 24, was that, you know, they just don't want to sit in a church and be preached at all day. That what they want is they want a word from the Lord, and then they want to take that word from the Lord out into the community and actually do work and see it in action. And then when I hear that and I read my Bible and I look at the life of Jesus in the Gospels, that's exactly what I see. I see him go to the synagogue, and then after he's done there, he's gone out into the community and he's doing work. At the same time, you have the disciples with him. And so people just want to see, you know what I mean, something happening outside the confines of the walls of the physical church, right? And so that's why
that's still part of the church. No,
yeah,
Jesus said, "Look, follow me." And if
right,
Umar was talking about what he put the disciples through, you know, he would flip his
right.
lid all
But
the
when you,
time, and the energy and effort that they had to put into it. And we're supposed to be God's modern day disciples as well. I'm
right.
just saying his approach is putting a spin on it to me that makes the church look bad.
But
But
look
you
at
know,
a bulletin.
I don't like the way he really presented
I
it
understand that.
in
I'm saying
a
look at a
certain light.
bulletin though. I'm saying look at a bulletin. It can be improved. There are certain things that I feel like
Yeah,
are not necessary to be placed in there. Like we can get through the service. I can hear you preach. We can have song service and all those other things. In terms of the church business at hand, there's a time for that. Where we
yeah.
could collectively do that. Today we have this thing called email, right? I'm sure there's a database with everyone's email address on it, right? You can address it in that way instead of holding people's attention,
Right.
right? For an extra amount of time, you
True.
know, during worship service. That's all I'm saying. It
That's
can be
true.
improved upon.
So I like the point that you drew out with your daughter Egypt, who said that they are you know, basically she's a part of a can-do
Mhm.
generation. And I think that, again, I can't speak for him, but I
Mm.
seem to feel like he would not include, as many would not include outreach in this indictment of the church monopolizing so much of its members' time,
Mhm.
because we live in a world where outreach is a part of the prevalent sermon that society teaches. Go out and do something for
Mhm.
others.
Mhm.
But I really think that he's referring to the churches that just have all of these service that are inside the four walls. Because remember, he cited examples: Sunday service, Sunday morning service, Sunday evening service,
Mhm.
Tuesday service, Wednesday service. So he's talking about coming back to a service and even not a meeting. Because you made a great point, Pastor Trey, that the more involved you are, you just very well might be obligated to a meeting, and that requires you to come back and put in some more time. But that's understandable because of the level of involvement. But these meetings that the examples that he used are a part of the services that everyone is expected to come back to.
He sounds
And
like
so,
he's talking about a specific denomination when you say that.
I don't know. I've been to at least two, I think three different denominations where that is the prevalent thought, and that's why I was going to share my testimony too. I agree with him wholeheartedly on this too, because I've been to churches where now again, if you, Elder Terrence and Pastor Trey, want to say, well, that's just not my church, that's what I want you to say. Because if he levels in an indictment and it doesn't apply to you, then you don't
not
have to
my
be
experience.
offended. Then you don't have to be offended either.
That's not my experience.
But if it does apply, those are the individuals, those are the churches, those are the leaders who ought to be offended if they're going to feel an offense. But I have been to more than two denominations, I think three different denominations, and there was a Sunday morning service. Everybody's expected to come to that. There's a Sunday evening service. Everybody's expected to come to that. There's a Bible study on Tuesday night. Everybody's expected to come to that. There's a prayer meeting or midweek prayer on Wednesday. Everybody's expected to come to that.
Yep.
And if the church is small enough, just about everybody in the church is in the choir at some rotation. So they on Thursday night, they need to come to choir rehearsal.
Oh man.
Now, how many days I just count? That's the Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That's 4 days and two services on Sunday. Is he making a point? If you ask me the question, is he making a valid point about time being monopolized about church in general, as I make that specific, or I make that clear, the answer is yes. I have seen abuse, and I'm like, man, when the folks get to stay home and eat?
Or just worship as a family at home.
Now watch this, and that's not about
Right.
So you guys use the example too that for your specific church that it's more one day heavy, even though you may have some other meetings that you from time to time come to throughout the week, but it's more heavy on the one day, on the Lord's Day, on the Sabbath, on Saturday. Well, see, that's different because if you're there already, you just roll over into another event. In fact, if people get tired, then they'll go home.
I personally try not to do meetings on Sabbaths.
Okay, all right, so that's the way you do it. But my point is that for you guys to say that your day is heavy on the Sabbath, I see that as on Saturday. I see that as a different type of burden, if you want to call it a burden, than coming back 4 days out of the week. So I don't think I don't even think that he had you guys as Saturday folks, and I'm a Saturday folk myself, in mind.
So folks are just not doing that anymore. That's why we're losing a lot of young people as well, and young adults. They're just not coming back to the church 3, 4, and 5 times throughout the week, and that expectation is not even realistic. You know, now in terms of Sabbath, I think it's good not to have a lot of meetings only where people are. First of all, if it's during the Sabbath hours, certain meetings you're not really supposed to have during those hours because you're talking about, the money and other things in the business, and you're not at a state of rest, while you're doing that. So we don't even hold church board meetings during the Sabbath hours. But if you do like how Christ did say to do, and what he did was he spent a lot of time in the community, visiting and spreading the gospel, it still takes time. So, you can't follow Christ's example if you're only going to come in for 1.5 hour program and then jet back home.
Right.
So that's not right either. But I would definitely say that those churches that used to do that with every day like that, they are quickly going out of style, and they're becoming less and less relevant to the modern minds and their schedules of today.
Speaking of, go ahead.
He said something that really jumped out at me. I remember when I was a young deacon in the church, and one of the elders, it was a communion Sabbath. And, I'm new to the denomination, whatnot, what have you. And he saw me, kind of took me under his wing. He was like, I'm going out today. I'd like for you to come out with me. And I was like, okay, sure. I'm with that. And so, man, it's probably one of the best experiences I'd had up to that point in my walk, because it showed me the other side of what Pastor just alluded to in terms of, it's not just about spending a couple of hours and then, you're gone. We're talking about time here. And so you have to be, if we're asking Christ to have gotten up on that cross and be selfless, we need to be selfless as well, right? My point is, we went to a convalescent hospital where a former member was, and we took communion to that individual, right? One of the greatest blessings that I've ever had. But still, it took time, my own time, which really is the Lord's time because it's Sabbath day anyway. But if you want to view that as taking too much of people's time, then I think you have the wrong God.
I would agree, and I don't think that he was saying that. That's what makes his for me, this video that I saw of his non-offensive to me, because that's not the way I interpreted him to be saying, but specifically to the ones that I described, which I know is the experience of a lot of people. Perhaps not you guys, because you guys have already intimated the way that you have gotten down at your specific churches. But, I assume he's getting around to a lot of churches. He's talking to a lot of people who have left the church, and they're sharing their experience. And there's this composite, or this running theme through all of them. And so if that's the running theme, then he has valid points. So if you're just tuning in and you're watching, we're talking about the remarks of Dr. Umar Johnson, who a few weeks ago, I believe it was, on TikTok was being interviewed, and he was talking about why he doesn't like Christianity, or as he puts it, the white religion. And he laid out 3 examples. One, because the church takes an enormous amount of money, and they take an enormous amount of time. And then the third one, I'm going to go ahead and play it. Let's go ahead and play it and see what he says about this one.
Wait and pray in order to change his circumstances. And that's why Napoleon Bonaparte, and I'm a fan of Napoleon.
Let me go back just a little bit.
You know why? Because it has black people thinking they don't have to wait and pray in order to change his circumstances. And that's why Napoleon Bonaparte, and I'm a fan of Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte, the white man's greatest military strategist, said what? Religion is what keeps the poor man from killing the rich.
Damn.
Okay, so let me stop that right there. So he basically was, I don't know if you guys caught that a little bit earlier, but he was saying, he said the church posits that all you have to do, in a nutshell, if I get some of this wrong, Dr. Umar Johnson, forgive me, that all they have to do is sit and pray to God and wait for him to do something in his own time, and that the hope of the Christian rests in that understanding, in that principle, just almost exclusively. Now, again, I know some of you here saying, well, that's not my understanding. That's not the way we do it at our church. And I agree, because that's not my understanding either, because I know better than that. But is he talking to a population that exists? And if he is it a valid point that he's making? So generally speaking, is it a valid point that the church has abused the hope of its members, or manipulated, or compelled them to want to have a hope in something that seems as though it doesn't have to be a hope? Just don't be lazy, go out and put out some work, and you can do some things and achieve some things on your own, rather than sitting and waiting. Does the church sometimes, and generally speaking, set up some of its members to not go out and do some work and just to sit and pray and wait on God?
Man,
I know y'all don't want to touch this.
maybe certain churches that he's familiar with teach.
But see, he's about getting in the community and going to all the meetings and fighting on the front lines for different causes and things that are happening in society, and
that's okay.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that is fine. I believe every church member should be encouraged, number one, to set your own house in order, have a relationship with God, and that there are things that are going to take place around your community and everywhere else like that. That the first position I think that we should take is to be a light in our community. Now, the way everyone gets involved is between them and God. We don't, as a church, jump out there and make take public stands to fight different causes out in the community, usually, depending on what it is. But we can get involved, but we don't just preach, pray, and do nothing, and just hope and just wish upon, that one day God's going to make everything better. No, we are a part of our communities. We're a part of our schools. We're a part of our unions. We're a part of, and we need to be engaged, be involved, and be present and be outspoken. Let your light shine. Now, if you're out there, you need some more support, then call upon the church, and we can give some support as others have the time to join in those movements. But our church normally would not, as a whole entire congregation, join certain projects unless it was fully understood and we voted that this was something that we wanted to do, which is rare. But the church, I believe, gives a good balance between belief in what God can do and also us doing our part to help things to be different.
I got to ask you, though, is it the church in general, or is it your church?
It
Are
should
you
be.
answering for your? Well, are you specifically answering for your church that that's the way that it exists, or are you attempting to answer for all churches that that is the
Well,
way that it is?
we're supposed to be enlightening our communities where our churches are from. So we cannot turn a blind eye and ignore the injustices or the problems and issues that happen in our very own city. We're in this city for a reason, and if there's some major problems in this city, our church needs to shine some light on it, shine truth to that, and try to be the salt, of the earth. And it's always, he makes it seem like we turn a complete blind eye to any and everything that's going on outside of the church walls. I'm just saying the way he presented it to me through
Well,
that video, that
okay.
video clip makes it seem almost like, well, yeah, we know the whole neighborhood and everything is just falling around us, and we're just going to sit here and pray. And that is false hope. To sit here and pray and do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Well, see, watch this, and this is what I want, Pastor Trey, because I get the sense that he's definitely struck a chord within you. He's often an offense to you. I just wouldn't take an offense if you're not guilty of it, but for him to make a more broad claim that the church in general, which is which when someone generally speaks, it's because you make an assumption that there's been a cross section and you've seen it happen in enough places that you could then speak in a general sense that is the church, even though there may be some outliers or some exceptions. Now, I consider you and Terrence and Pastor Dre as exceptions to the rule. And if people want to know how you're supposed to actually operate in a church, then they should follow you. But when he makes a claim and it's broad, I think the claim is valid because when you have a church that does seem to preach very strictly that you need to pray before you get up. You need to pray what the Lord wants you to do today before you get up. You need to pray at lunchtime, pray at breakfast, and pray at. It just seems to be abuse. That's not what Watch this, and I think you guys understand that obviously you know me. I'm down with Jesus, which is the modern transliteration of his name, not his real name. And I'm about that Bible, and I can defend it and tell you why it's the most reliable source to read. But I understand that there are abuses that take place, and when they're exaggerated, we don't do Jesus a service, a good service. We do a disservice to him by allowing for exaggerations and abuses to exist. And so when people are telling you that you got to pray before you stand up and you pray before you sit down, listen, stop. The Lord gave you a brain to think and to make certain decisions, to take care of yourself. If you fall on a train track and the train is coming, it would seem that these individuals that abuse it would tell you to stay on the track and pray and ask the Lord to help you get off the track. No, the Lord is telling you, use your leg strength, get up off of it and avoid the train. Okay, but so many times has that been seen or witnessed, leadership and not your church, because we know that you don't do it at yours, or you do it at yours. But in so many other churches, that's the impression people get, that I can't do anything without praying and asking God for permission. But we know that that's not true. We pray. We are to develop a regular dialogue with him. But during the course of this dialogue, do what you already know to be true. Go to work, get a job, feed your kids. We don't need to be we don't need to pray about that. Just go and do these things that you already know to do. And I think that when I hear him saying that, I hear him speaking to the abusive teachings that many churches have presented. And as a result, you have a lot of people leaving the church confused about God, don't know what he really means, how to operate with him. When do I pray? How do I pray? I close my eyes or I get on my knees? Can I talk it? Can I pray in my car with my eyes open? Folks are confused. And so again, I don't. The last thing I say. I mean, I don't agree with everything Dr. Umar Johnson posits. But this particular video, I was not offended because he wasn't talking to me. He just wasn't talking to me in my church
I would
because we
say,
don't do that.
I would say too, though, he does kind of make me wonder if he himself has read the Bible at all, because when I look, particularly even at the Old Testament, right, you see many a times, whether it was David, whether it was Gideon, you look at these situations where these folks have consulted with God or consulted with God's prophet before they went out, to war or whatnot, what have you. But there's the consultation. They sought counsel from the Lord. And then the Lord would give counsel. And then they themselves physically would have to go out and act, right? It's not a matter of, oh, let's just keep praying and then God will make something happen.
That's not
You know what I mean? That's just simply not biblical. However, on the other hand, in terms of, being being a part of a church in a particular community, and having to come together and decide, if something is worth us being involved in. One thing I recognize for myself as a Christian first, I'm a Christian first before I'm anything, is that Christ calls us to do all that we can to make sure that things are equitable, right? That there is justice, right? I just came across a video most recently where this woman, who actually happens to work of all places at the CIA, and one of her assignments is to be on this team for diversity, right? Come to find out that, she has a student in the public school system in the state of Virginia. And so what's going on there is that they've totally omitted out of their teaching curriculum the reality of slavery. And so when a child goes to take this test on American history and whatnot, what have you, if they answer a question in regards to slavery, put it to you this way. When it talks about the African here in the United States and the ancestry and the history of that of us as a people, it goes back as far as to say that we were servants, possibly say slaves. That's it. It doesn't talk about the horrors. It doesn't talk about, the different slave owners, the iconic figures that were slave owners, and so on. And so there's no in-depth study of this. And so basically, it's teaching the student to lie about their own history, let alone to help to educate others outside of our ethnicity on the reality of, what we came from, what we went through, and how we helped to build this nation of the United States. My point being is that if anyone should be at the forefront in helping to push an agenda such as this, it should be the church, in my opinion. If you have young men and women that are going to jail and to prison and whatnot, what have you, at astronomical rates, and for the same crime, our European counterparts are being given probation, if not no time at all, that should be an issue that we take up, because there's no justice, there's no equity there. And so when the church stands pat and is silent on that, I personally have a problem with that. I wouldn't want to be a part of a church institution or movement, and for any reason that did not stand up for all of its members, no matter what.
Absolutely. Just remember, Dr. Omar is an activist, so he probably would have felt that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was giving false hope at one point. He's coming from more of a
No, he spoke to that,
like a Malcolm X kind of standpoint.
He spoke to that, Pastor Trey. There's a part 2 to this.
I don't know if I missed
a real small clip, and he talked about that, not in the sense of Dr. King in that aspect that you just regarded, but he talked about how fearful he and his cohorts became after they saw the assassination of Malcolm, after they saw the assassination of Medgar Evers. And then he says, in his opinion, you saw them revamp how they were going to attack. because before they were attacking, he brought up the deacons for defense, and how, you know, they were the precursor to, even the predecessor, excuse me, to the Black Panther Party in terms of taking up arms against the Klan and, you know, other racist entities and whatnot, what have you. And then once those high profile assassinations occurred, now all of a sudden you saw them begin to acquiesce and somewhat assimilate. He goes on to even
soften up some.
yeah, he goes on to articulate that when you bring it fast forward to at least near and dear to our present, Bush in 2000, he created this faith-based initiative where they began to give monies out to faith-based institutions similar to our own. And so then what you began to see was folks began to, because they're taking this money, they stopped being out in the forefront, you know what I mean, fighting that good fight for justice and equality and equity in our communities like they used to during the civil rights era. And so that's what, according to him, prompted the necessity of, you know, certain groups like BLM and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm.
So
just remember one thing real quick, that, you know, Jesus did say, my kingdom is not of this world, or else I would fight. We should never forget our focus is to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ around the world. Now, having said that, that's definitely not false hope message. And also, while we're out there, we're supposed to meet the needs of the people. Now, if there's injustice that is cutting into their needs, such as housing, equal rights and voting, and so forth and so on, the church can be there to assist and help. But all of our time, energy, and effort and focus can't be on any of the earthly struggles, when our number one mandate is to spread the gospel and to make sure people's soul salvation has been secured by accepting Jesus as their personal savior. Because then no matter what all happens with these earthly challenges, at least for them and their household, that they will be saved. And to me, that's a little more important, our eternal salvation of the people we're talking to and their families and so forth and so on, than all the earthly struggles that will take much longer over time. We'll have to fight these battles, but the church will be there and support and help and assist. But that's still not the number one focus or message while we're out there.
I would agree. I would also caution you to realize that it's hard to hold on to just that when you're trying to walk to church, so to speak. And the fact that you're melanated is the very reason why you're accosted and assaulted by the very entities that are supposed to, under federal law, serve and protect you. And so it creates a situation where the two things intersect with one another, and it's inevitable that you at least attempt to address both.
So
I believe that.
So I think, you know, most certainly we have, all of us here and many in our particular community are familiar with Dr. Umar Johnson as the activist that he is. So, you know, we know how he gets down, and when he gets on to something, you know, he's coming strong, and he's gonna be you know, he's going to be handing down indictments to somebody. Somebody is getting an indictment on something. So the approach that we saw in this video, we're not surprised by that. I thought that this would be a good topic of discussion, because I just so happen to agree with him that there has been abuse in all three of those areas. Now, I must also make it clear, too, that he was specifically talking about mega churches, and as he puts it, that was defined by churches that are collecting $250,000 a year or more, and he exempted those churches that didn't make that much from the prescribed goals that he had laid out: a bank, a garden, and
a school.
Bank, a garden, and a school. A bank, a garden, and a school.
Now I agree with that.
Yeah,
Um,
I thought those were just great ideas, great
sure.
goals, because how awesome would that be for a church, particularly, of course, you know what he's about. So
Right.
he's about his people, and so he was targeting Black churches
Mm-hmm.
specifically, that this
Mm-hmm.
is what you should be doing to help your community. And so I thought they were great ideas. I'm not going to say whether or not, that's what that all churches who can afford it, that they need to do all three of those things because he said it. But I thought that they were great ideas.
I agree.
Um,
I don't think the 250 a year is enough to erect a bank. I
Right.
would say how about you repackage that? I'm not disagreeing with him. I'm just saying how about you repackage that and you begin to institute and foster some level of financial literacy for your
Right.
church members, and then you form an investment group within the church, and everybody can pool their monies, and you know what I mean, as you become
and
more,
earn something.
yeah, and
Right.
earn something, and be and
Mm,
start planning for your future, your retirement, college funds, things of that nature, and just
mhm.
help people to better understand how to keep their money moving. On
I
the other
like that.
hand, when you're talking about a community garden, that's excellent.
Beautiful.
I know of a young man right here in the Bay Area where we are, where his calling is to go and teach the people who have nothing but the corner store to go and shop because there's no Whole Foods in their neighborhood. He's teaching them how to address the food desert situation by
Yeah.
creating just a small garden, even if you live in an apartment, right there in your window. You can grow your own tomatoes and grow some
Mm,
basil and grow different things like that, and just start trying to, bit by bit address certain things. If you have an actual home and you've been blessed in that way, then obviously you can extend that a little further out. You know what I mean? And then you're talking about
mhm.
schools. Now, to be honest with you, I see a lot of religious institutions that do have schools right
Oh
now.
yeah.
At least
Um,
in the early
Beautiful.
yeah,
early
yeah.
grades. At
So
least
Love
in the
that.
early grades.
some of those things are already in play, and again, some of those things can be improved upon in terms of how you
Mhm.
want to approach them. But
But but
definitely,
but,
definitely
but
good ideas. Go ahead.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
You know what? Let's go back to that bank situation now.
Uh
I
huh.
probably need more information as to how that could actually happen.
Uh huh.
Um, for a non-for-profit um, a church structure, how it could formulate itself into having its own bank. I'm not exactly sure how that's a possibility, but you know, I'm not sure if that sticks with the mission of the church. And then also, once we become a bank, there are different expectations also that the parishioners would have concerning that. All banks that I know of, even lending with interest and all the kind of stuff like that, you know, God wouldn't want us to do that to anybody.
Hmm.
We'll penalize people if they overdraft or late. God wouldn't want us to do that to people. Now banks, from my understanding, act like they can't survive unless they put these penalties and all of
Hmm.
these things in place. And
Hmm.
banks are making money off of
Hmm.
people in the communities. I don't know how a bank would survive, um, if it did not have those guardrails.
Pastor Trey, I don't know how it works either, but I do know because I'm from Oakland. There is a church in my hometown that has their own federal credit union. So they have their own school, they have their own federal
Mhm.
credit union, whatnot, what have you. It's one of the larger churches, but this is something. And then they have, as a matter of fact, they also have their own senior living facility as well. So
Yeah, I'm looking at Bill Winston Ministries. They've got their own
There's
bank.
there's definitely a way to do it. I agree with Terrence though. You definitely need more than a church with more than $250,000 a year,
mhm.
likely for the numbers to add up and you
Especially
to
in
be able to do
California.
it. Yes, especially in tax crazy California.
Man.
Love my state, but hate the way it's being run right
Hmm.
about now. That's another
Hmm.
story.
Do you feel like like that would be the mission of the church to put together a structure such as that financially to become a bank and to make that a major part of?
Very, very good. If you'd asked me that 20 years ago, I would have said, yes, there's still time. But because I'm an individual who, holds a certain eschatology, a belief in end times, I say that there's no time for that, and that efforts and monies should be utilized in another area. But that's just my thought and opinion. But in an ideal world, if I thought that all the generations that are living today would not see the return of Jesus, then I would say, yeah, that'd be a wonderful goal to have. But I'm just not of that belief that the generations today are not going to see the return of the creator of the universe. So I think that it's an effort that probably would take it would pull away from the spreading of I see it as pulling away from the gospel and spreading too thin. But I could be wrong in that too. So but that's my thought.
I would say in answer to his question, if I may, because he did say stand, but I would say that isn't an endeavor that we should necessarily take up. I would lean more toward the financial literacy, and because I know within our own denomination we have many financial experts, many of them, and everybody could pool their knowledge and resources together, poor, middle class, and wealthy. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that it has to be top heavy. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying in terms of the knowledge so that folks can make more well-informed decisions about their money. And I think that that's the reason why many of us who are living below the poverty line are exactly that. Now, we could talk about powers that be and all of that. That's an entirely different show. Not getting into that. But in terms of just financial literacy and allowing folks to navigate through needs and wants and whatnot, what have you, and how to be disciplined in how they spend their monies and whatnot, what have you. Yeah, man, I think that would lend itself to actually enriching the church as a whole, because then you would have a more organized and a more balanced approach to how we church. And I guarantee you what you would see is you would see an exceptional increase in the tithe and offering on that front.
So I agree with you too. I believe that's a great idea, but I believe that all of the above really are acceptable. I mean, given that you have time, resources, both human resources and financial resources, do as many things as you can, because I think that the problem with many who are not in the church is what services are churches providing to its members other than the gospel. Now, if you ask me, the gospel is enough. But that's just me. I can't speak for everyone else. Someone who is in need of financial services or financial education, right? They will say that's what they need, and that's what they would like for the church to provide. Okay, so what is the church's objective beyond the gospel? If for those who say the church's only objective is to provide the service of the gospel, well, then I guess they don't have to do anything else. But for everyone else who says we believe the onus on the church is to preach the gospel, yes, but to do other things like what they're already doing, like feeding the homeless, or like providing clothing for the poor, or like providing financial assistance at times for certain individuals. You see that those churches have said
and
that we have
different needs.
Yeah, right. And so, but those churches, generally speaking, have said that we feel like we have an obligation to do more than just teach the gospel. Teaching the gospel is prominent. That's number one. And like I said, if all you do is give me the gospel, I'm happy with it. But I think that as church leaders, like we all are here, we feel specifically that we should do as much as we can. We should be we should be everything to all people as much as we can. Now, all right, so watch this. So what are some of those services that can be provided? Well, we talked about food. We talked about financial assistance. We talked about clothing. There's mental health. But there's education. Well, a bank would actually provide some services too. So there is a valid argument for having a bank.
So you were trying to get her on. We have a pastor that we were trying to get on this broadcast today. Unfortunately, her schedule would not permit. But what I do know about her is that not only is she a pastor, but she's also a lawyer. But not only is she a lawyer, one of the many ministries that she had in the local church was that she was preparing folks' taxes for them for free. Right? Tax season would come in, and she would come up to the church and set up and people would come in, the community would come in, and they would have their taxes prepared for them. You see what I'm saying? So it's just something different that we could offer. And if that's not ministry, I don't know what else you call it.
Well, and I think that was my point, was to say we don't have to limit the church in general with what services they should provide. They're under no obligation to provide more than the gospel if they can't do anything more.
Right.
But if they can do more, why get in the way of that? And so, that's my thought. I think Dr. Umar, he placed more of an obligation on the church, and that's what you must do.
Exactly. And if
I don't agree with that, because there are other ways in which it can be done. But he's coming from that again,
because he's looking at it from a position of plight. He's looking at it in a position of plight of a specific people, meaning us.
Right.
And so, his passion, while it is passion, to some degree, it can border prejudice as well. Like, because you want to exclude everyone. So what are we going to do? Be in a black church and have 4 white members, but you can exclude them because they're not black? No. You know what I mean? The church is the church. We service everyone.
Right. Well, we can give our final thoughts. We haven't gone this long in a while, and I still have more questions, but we'll bring it to a close. But let me just invite you guys to go ahead and give your final thoughts. I'll begin with you, Pastor Trey, and give us some parting wisdom. Again, I just want to reiterate and say that, I'm glad that where you are, because you can't even speak for everyone in the organization that you're a part of. But I'm glad where you are, you have that transparency. There's accountability with how money is being spent. You don't overburden, just keep asking and asking people for money, 3 and 4 times during the service. And, and you're doing right about the hope. Everything that he laid out, you're doing it. So he's not even talking to you because you don't qualify. But give us your final thoughts for us.
I really appreciate this opportunity to defend the church as much as I can. I understood the points that were made and the abuses that can happen across the board in all of those areas. The church does have a greater responsibility to protect not just its own congregation, but the public that may come and visit. And unfortunately, many times it does not equate that way. So when visitors come and when people are inquiring about the church, they're looking at it more like the church wants all of my money, they want all of my time, and at the end of the day, they're giving us false hope. That's a mindset that I can understand that people could have based off the abuses that happen in the majority of churches that are out there. And it hurts my heart to see that. I wish that the churches were more transparent, all of them. I wish that the churches would be a little bit more clear about time spent, that the time that we spend should be based off of their levels of interest and more involved in doing ministries instead of sitting in meetings all day in the church building. And I wish that we could be a little more clear also, that we give the only true hope in Christ that's able to save us. At the same time, we have responsibility in this community to not just talk hope, but get out there and to help and to assist and lend a hand to those things that are happening, make the church more relevant in what's going on in society today. So even the greatest activists should be able to say, this church right here, they are about something because they're getting involved.
Yeah.
They're not just talking the talk, but they're walking the walk. And that's the beauty of who we are, is that, we're able to back up what we believe in our everyday lifestyle. We cannot be absent in our communities when it comes to all these things that need to happen. But at the same time, when we show up, we're bringing the gospel. Amen. And we're bringing truth and a helping hand to people that are in need.
Come on.
And I don't think that would be anything that Dr. Umar would have an issue or a problem with.
At your church, that's what I'm talking about, or yours. Come on, or mine. Come on. Perhaps if he had come and interviewed us before he decided to go on TikTok, it might have changed. Maybe partly.
God willing.
His indictment. Come on,
man. I would say, first of all, I agree to the utmost with what Pastor Trey just shared with us. I would add that just as we examine ourselves, or at least we should be examining ourselves on a daily basis, something that I do, try to see how today I can be better than I was yesterday, improve. So should we look at, how we church and how we can improve it without compromising the gospel. That, without question, is not even up for discussion, right? But how can we improve as a church without compromising the gospel? And this is something that I believe we should do on a daily basis. But I would also say that even having said that, when you spoke earlier about, making sure that we're present in our communities, that we're seen in our communities, that we're that light in our communities, man, absolutely, most absolutely. And I just think that lends itself to us, I guess, teaching this next generation and also learning and gleaning from this next generation on how to make ourselves more visible, so that accusations like this that are on the most part unfounded with the way that we church, they can be given a little bit more light on, what we do and how we operate as Christians.
Mm. Love it. My final thoughts, once again, that I believe that the brother had some points, or he at least, well, not that he at least, I'm happy. I'm perfectly fine. I'm happy that he raised the issue so that it could provoke conversation and give each of us a chance to say, well, while that might be very many's experience, that's not the way we do it here, where we're at. And I share in that where I went to where I go to church, that's not the way we get down. We don't abuse money. We don't overly tax the folks on their pockets. We don't monopolize their time. In fact,
is your mind controlled?
If we're mine certainly isn't. In fact, we challenge everybody to challenge what we believe, if you like, because we're confident that what we believe will stand the litmus test.
Amen.
It will stand up through the litmus test. So we invite people to challenge what we say. And personally, if I discover that I'm wrong on something, I'll say that I'm wrong, and I will change. If you can show me that I was wrong, I will change the way that I think. Bless his name. So we don't abuse, we don't mind control, we don't overly take their money or monopolize their time. We're respectful of their time, and we don't mislead people in their hope. And so I say this to say that while that might be many people's experience, it's not the experience that you should have, and that there are places where you can go and have it done right and have the right experience. In fact, the same is true for Dr. Umar Johnson. If he wants to see how church is done differently, he can come see any one of us here. Come go where we go. And he'll be free to ask questions. We don't shut down questions.
That's right.
People free to ask. It doesn't matter how. There's no offensive question. If you have an honest inquiry, ask your question, because we interpret that as you're looking for understanding. You want to know the whys. Well, we welcome the whys.
Amen.
We had whys before. So I'm not going to get off on a sermon, but man, this has been good. Stand by, Pastor Trey, as to just debrief real quickly before we get off. But I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. Hope that you found some value out of this this discussion. And while, it was a discussion on who is considered a controversial figure, I don't so much see him as a controversial figure, although I don't agree with a good number of his positions. That's what we do here. We tackle the stuff that other people won't tackle. And so we hope, though, that you found some value out of this, and I look forward to seeing you on the next time that we get together.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yes, until
God
then.
bless you. It's snowy here, man. We under snow.
Come on.
Freezing.
Come
Freezing
on. Come
temperatures.
on.
Y'all look like it's warm out there.
Listen, well, it's not exactly warm, but by comparison, it is, you know, and I won't complain. I like snow on a part-time basis, so I won't complain. Y'all got it on a full time. All right,
All
we'll
right.
see you
God
guys
bless you.
next week. God bless you.
Okay.